There are so many different study techniques and skills and things that people share all over the internet. It's hard to know which one's good, which one's bad, which ones should you completely ignore, which ones you should be using every single minute of every single day in your life. If you find the right combination of learning strategies and put them together into a system, that can like easily save you 10, 15 hours a week. But you have to be doing them the right way. So I put out some feelers this morning asking a lot of our community members what are like their favorite or what they call their best study strategies and their worst ones. I think the worst are. And so we got some pretty interesting answers, but we just wanted to make this video to help guide some students. So S tier means definitely do it. Everyone should be doing S tier stuff. And then D tier is absolutely do not do this, run away, run for the hills, don't even touch them. Do not be disturbed by the D tier stuff.
So looks like the first one here we got is flashcards. Oh boy. Mike and Matty and flashcards go way back.
Yeah. Everyone remember Remnote?
Oh, we came from medical school. And med students love using flashcards.
Yeah. Basically, what I was taught in med school was you just make 5,000 flashcards and then you just spend all day, all night doing flashcards everywhere you go.
In the bathroom.
On the elevator. Bus, in class.
Yeah,
when you're supposed to be paying attention. I think flashcards have a pretty specific purpose, which to me is trying to memorize a piece of information. That's what we call rote learning.
Yeah, I was gonna say like flashcard is just inherently rote learning.
Yeah.
You're just repeating something the same way.
But over-relying on flashcards eventually reaches a point where it becomes counterproductive. And this is because of a pretty well-studied psychological effect called the illusion of familiarity. You remember that there is a flashcard that you've created about this idea.
Yeah.
And then you just associate, oh yeah, I made a flashcard about that. That's going to be the answer. That's never how you're tested on it. I would honestly give it, even if you do it well, a C. I don't think it should be a core part of your system. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think C is fair. So the next one here, the Feynman Technique. And I think it's named after Richard Feynman, but not created by him. The Feynman Technique is a way of teaching something to yourself. Picking a topic and then you're trying to break it down into the simplest terms. And then you're really looking for where are the gaps in your knowledge. And so if you do this enough, then you'll identify all your weak spots. And then you can go back to your notes and then you can learn more about what you missed. The thing about the Feynman Technique is I don't think there's really a wrong way to do it. Like at least if you try to do it, then you're getting some benefit. I think the more important thing about Feynman is to just understand that teaching itself as a strategy is a very powerful strategy. And Feynman is not the only way to teach.
Yeah, I think something that Feynman does pretty well is it gives good step-by-step instructions for how to think about teaching.
Yeah, I think that giving structure to how to use techniques is a great way to learn how to use it correctly and get the most out of it.
So with all of that, I would almost say that we just transformed the Feynman technique into teaching, right? So what would you rank teaching as?
Oh, definitely S tier.
Yeah, I was actually going to say the same thing. And we have our first S tier skill right there. So the next strategy on this list is Pomodoro. Pomodoro is where you work for a short period of time, usually 25 minutes. You take a 5-minute break and then you just rinse and repeat that cycle. And I think Pomodoro, honestly, for like the barrier to entry to do it, which is incredibly low, all you need is a timer, it can get you pretty far. I actually like how like it is such a simple tool that can get someone to focus quickly. I do think that Pomodoro runs into some issues down the line, especially once you get more comfortable with focusing for longer stretches of time, that you don't necessarily want to break at 25 minutes or even 50 minutes if you're able to like sustain good flow and rhythm for a long time. And so because it has that limitation of it being too rigid, I wouldn't give it an S tier, but actually I would think Pomodoro is like an A tier.
Yeah, I was going to say A tier actually, because it's a very user-friendly technique. Go to cajuncoy.com/focus. Just go there.
That's the best place to go to. Actually, that's the best one.
Next is practice problems or practice tests of
self-assessment.
Basically having some sort of material that reflects what you might see on the day of the exam. The bad way to use it is you're just trying to breeze through and passively memorize the answers to the questions. But the good way to use it is to actually understand why the right answers are right and then why the wrong answers are wrong. If when you're doing a practice problem, like a multiple choice practice problem, it could potentially be 5 questions all packaged into one. So it's like 5 learning points that you could possibly benefit from.
I think practice problems are something that, depending on the subject you're studying, of course, is going to be like the default resource that's given to you. Any kind of calculation-based class like math, physics, chemistry, you're going to be given practice problems. Same thing in medicine. Like queue banks of thousands of practice problems. And the reason why I would encourage people to use them is because that is exactly how you are going to be tested. Aside from like does it help you learn better versus does it help you get better grades? I think those are two different outcomes. It does get you better grades because it's how you're going to be tested.
I would give this an A tier.
Okay, moving on to the next one. This is kind of a broad category, but it's called study planning. And this is really just because from Discord, I got so many people saying that the best strategies they use is literally like, I like planning my day. I like planning my next big day.
So like the whole thing about planning is that you want to have a balance between your studying and your social life and your personal life.
Yeah.
Right. So planning is extremely important.
Planning is just one of those meta skills that will help you just be a more productive human.
Most people, their idea of planning is, oh, I need to study sometime today. Like that is their version of planning, where you don't know when you're going to be studying. You don't know what you're going to be studying. You don't know how long you're going to be studying. Those are the three questions you should definitely answer for every single study session. When, how long, and what. And most people don't do that.
If you're doing it with the intentionality that we just talked about, study planning is easily S tier.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Okay. So the next one on the list here is interleaving. So interleaving is not really like a technique.
It's like a
more
strategy.
just like like a mindset strategy of how you can implement different study skills. Interleaving basically means mixing up what you're studying so that you can find connections and relationships between a lot of potentially related concepts, but you wouldn't have found that unless you were thinking about how is this related to something else.
The visualization that I like to keep in my head for interleaving would be like, let's say that you're trying to be like a master chef at cooking fish. You know this analogy?
Yeah, I know this analogy.
I love this analogy. So let's say that you're trying to like become the best fish chef in the world. If you keep cooking the same dish,
The fish dish.
the same fish dish over and over again, then you'll only get good at that one fish dish. But interleaving means that you're cooking the fish in many different ways. So you could make sushi, for example. You could make fish and chips. I don't know what that looks like, fish and chips. Or you can make baked fish, you can make steamed fish. There's so many ways to cook a fish, and by doing it in so many different ways, you see how each way is different. You see how each way is related to each other. You can compare and contrast which ways are easier, harder, which ways are more valuable.
Right.
So all those things is what you get from interleaving.
Yeah. And I guess comparing the chef to you as a learner, what chef do you think knows fish better? The one who only knows how to make really good, what was this one?
Like a baked fish, I guess.
a baked fish expert, or a chef that knows how to make all of these and knows why the flavors of these different dishes goes together. Clearly, I would want that chef who knows the wide range of things in my kitchen.
I would say S tier.
So next on the list is priming. Priming basically means, this is actually a term that comes from psychology, behavioral psychology, which is the way that you experience something, or it shapes the next time that you see it. So with studying, priming means getting familiar with some of the stuff that you're about to study or learn before you actually get deep into learning it. Like skimming through the lecture slides, skimming through the textbook chapter, or like watching some short YouTube videos about the topic, just to get like an overview or general idea about it before you go to class, so that you're not completely lost and seeing it for the first time.
You're surveying, you're scoping.
Yeah.
So many words for it. I would say that priming is really underrated, because if you go to class and you didn't prime the material, and
You're gonna be so lost.
Exactly. If the teacher, like once you get lost, you're going to fall so behind that you're not going to be able to keep up. Then most students are just going to zone out and just kind of give up.
Priming can be very, very effective, but I think it is actually really difficult to do well.
Yeah.
I would actually, let's just give it an A. How about that?
I would give it an A. Yeah.
This next strategy is called chunking. What's chunking?
So chunking is basically reducing the amount of information that you need to learn, group them together. This is really interesting analogy that I heard from one of the business podcasts I was listening to.
Okay.
But so there are these human beings who actually have eaten entire trains and planes, like airplanes.
Oh, I think I've seen this somewhere.
Yeah,
I've seen this article
wow,
for
this
it.
is like pretty interesting. And so what they do is like they take the entire plane and they grind it down into powder.
Break it apart, yeah.
Yeah, so they have like this little container of like, it's like pepper. So every meal they eat, they just sprinkle a little bit of the plane or train onto their meal and they'll eat that. Yeah, chunking is basically just like making it easier for you to digest lots of information.
Yeah. So anything like longer than a sequence of 4 or 5 is really difficult for our brain to wrap its head around. But that's why if you think of like phone numbers, they break it up into like 3-digit, 4-digit, 4-digit instead of just like 10 in a row. So they're chunking it by little groups like that, so it's easier for you to remember. And anything that you're trying to learn is to break it down into different categories and try to see what is the flow and the order of information. What would you give chunking?
Gotta be A tier or higher,
Okay,
I would say.
let's give it an A tier. So the next skill on the list is syntopical reading. This is actually something that came from Mortimer Adler. Is that Mortimer Adler?
Yeah, Mortimer Adler.
Mortimer Adler.
How to read a book.
So syntopical reading simply means consuming multiple different resources at the same time to understand a topic. So instead of just using your lecture slides, it's also watching some YouTube videos, reading some other textbooks. I know that no one wants to think about reading multiple textbooks for class. Using
ChatGPT.
talking to your professor or your classmates. That is supposed to give you a better perspective to that subject.
I think it's incredibly valuable because
Yeah.
when you go to school, your professor gives you one point of view. That's the professor's point of view.
Yeah,
If they wrote the book, then that's just their point of view.
that's true.
But if they like assign you like a textbook that was written by someone else, then now you have 2 points of view.
And I know a lot of people like are averse to syntopical reading because at least when I was in college, I hated it when my professor would be like, oh, there's all these optional readings you can do. And as a student, I'm like, I'm not gonna read
Not
all
gonna do
this.
that.
I'm not gonna do extra stuff if I don't have to. I'm just gonna give it a B.
I was
Because you
gonna
can
say
pretty,
B
you can get
too.
pretty far with
You can go down
one
a
or
rabbit
two
hole.
resources and you can get lost in
can get
details
lost
and
for
stuff.
sure.
So the next technique on the list is blurting.
Blurting. So this is basically another word for brain dumping, I guess.
That's right. Brain
It's just like you're just trying to write everything that you know about a topic. I think with blurting, the whole point of it is that there's no structure to it. The good part about it, I think, is that it's forcing you to try to recall things.
Right, you're pulling it
Yeah,
from the dome.
exactly. Recall, retrieval, whatever you want to say. But the danger of using blurting is like you could just be recalling facts and not really thinking about how everything relates together.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with not having structure.
But if you're just like randomly recalling everything you know about like Japan in a random order, then it's probably not going to be very useful.
There's like no direction. Like, why are you doing this?
Yeah. So having some kind of structured approach to blurting would make it would make it a lot better.
Yeah.
But then at that point, it just becomes teaching, right?
Not even as good as teaching because you're
teaching's
not
better,
necessarily
not
like
sketching.
using simple words. I would probably say like a C.
Yeah. I'm good with giving it a C. So the next one on the list is frameworking.
Frameworking.
Maybe you can also call this like modeling. So frameworking basically means giving structure to the way that you think about something. The most common types of frameworks that you might be familiar with from anything like a table, a graph,
Yeah.
a flow chart. Those are all different kinds of frameworks. Venn diagrams,
One of my
probably
favorites,
being
Venn
the biggest ones.
diagram.
Yeah, love Venn diagrams. I will also say though that frameworks is pretty hard to do. It is very stressful. It can take a lot of time, and especially if you're drawing, it could be like what you just saw Mike doing. You could spend a lot of time trying to draw a framework before you even get to a shape that you like. And so because of that, I would actually probably just give it a B.
Okay.
What would you say? You want to go higher?
I was gonna say A, but I think B is fair.
Okay. Moving on to the next one. We have rereading.
We have so
I don't know if we need to spend too much time on rereading. I
Yeah.
think the world at this point, the internet knows that it's not very strong, and I stand behind it.
yeah, you're basically just rote learning, like
It's-
passive rote learning.
It's passive because it is not challenging your brain in any capacity. You're just reading words. It's playing into this thing called the illusion of familiarity. So when you read something, your brain actually believes that it understands what you read. The same thing as if you watch something, your brain understands, it thinks that it understands what you watched. For example, like if you watch a documentary, you will be entranced in that documentary, like, oh my God, I'm learning so much about history. An hour later, I guarantee you will have forgotten like 80% of it. Like the students who reread their notes over and over and over, they're just like giving their brain dopamine, just like, yeah, I know all this. I know it's all so easy, so easy, so easy. The moment you take it away and they try to recall it, they're stuck. And so rereading is just dangerous for those reasons. And for that, I can't give it anything lower than a D. I would give it an F if I could.
Like D for detrimental. D for
D for
health.
damage. D for just major damage. So the next one here, we can quickly talk about going to class. What do you think about going to class?
I mean, it depends like if it's mandatory or not. Like, that's like the thing we always see like in our community. Like I have to go to class. I have to sign in or else I'll fail.
I think going to class for the typical student in the US, because that's all most of the students I know, is not very good because they do not prime. They go in completely blind to class, usually in college after a terrible night of drinking and partying. And or being hungover and or maybe being drunk in class. Who knows? It's like what kids do nowadays. But for all those reasons, if you go to class without preparing, without having even a pencil and a notebook, without knowing anything, it's a wasted hour. Or more, depending on how long the class is.
Yeah.
But if you do all the things you're supposed to do, which is like prime and then like be prepared and then pay attention and ask questions, then it can be pretty useful. So it's pretty in the middle for me. Like, I don't know what I would say.
I don't know. I have nothing more to add to that. Like, I would agree. It's just hard because like coming from med school, it wasn't mandatory.
Yeah, it was great. So I never went to class.
Yeah. And the thing is like, it actually made me more self-reliant.
Yeah.
And it made me like more autonomous with my studying because I didn't go.
I'm gonna give it a C.
Yeah. C for class.
Yeah. Next one on the list, highlighting. Basically just highlighting over words and sentences that you think are important.
Yeah. I'm gonna highlight this here.
I generally don't think it's too useful.
Like if you're rereading your notes and you're highlighting important things in your notes, then it's already passive. You're not really adding much more. If you're like tree noting or mind mapping and you're using highlighting like color coding in your mind maps to make things pop out, then I think that's pretty useful.
I think what they're referring to is what you said before. You think it might be useful, so you highlight it to come back to it again later. But that is the problem right there. If you're highlighting something because you don't want to forget it, because you want to come back to it again,
then you're just not learning.
Then you are basically just delaying learning.
Then that's D.
It's D. Like you're not learning. You're waiting. You're delaying. D for delaying. Next one on the list, rewatching.
Didn't we just do this?
Similar to rereading. I guess we talked about it already. I'm also going to give this one a D. We can just breeze by it.
Do we even need to talk about it?
No, not really. D, rewatching is a D. If you didn't get anything the first time, then if you rewatch it without any new information, then you're also not going to get anything out of it.
Yeah.
So the next one on the list here is spaced repetition. So spaced repetition, I don't even know if it's like actually like a study strategy.
It's a strategy.
It's a strategy. And it basically is the opposite of cramming. So you could be spending the same overall amount of time on a subject, but you're just doing it either all at once, which is cramming, or spacing, which is over time. And what science has shown us is that spacing is far superior to cramming.
I think I'll add a little bit to it. I tried to draw a brain here. I don't know if there's a shape of a brain.
Yeah.
And I've labeled this working memory and this is long-term memory. Those are not like the actual accurate locations, but we'll just go with it for now.
They're actually flipped. But
oh, okay. Well, when you space things out, it gives your brain a chance to take the information you learn and put it into long-term memory. So that's like, you need time for your brain to connect the ideas to long-term memory.
The reason you want to do it a little bit every single day is because during the time that you're not, like the in-between time is when your brain actually moves information into long-term memory. So if you don't give your brain some time to like debrief, process information, then it actually just forgets it. And so if you cram it all at once and then you take your exam and you never look at it again, most of that stuff didn't go to your long-term memory, so you're going to lose it all. So spacing is just like a way to incrementally add building blocks to what you know without losing it all. If your goal is long-term retention, then it's pretty high.
Yeah. Maybe an A.
Yeah, let's give it an A.
Or an S. I mean, it depends.
I'm gonna give it an A. So the next one on the list is mind mapping.
Well, basically, the point I was trying to make with like mind mapping is that it's similar to blurting. A lot of people want to use it because it's like a trendy technique.
Yeah.
But without very clear protocol or guidelines or structure on how to use it, then you can use it incorrectly and waste a lot of time. Here's like a typical mind map you would see. It's like, it's hard to know like what the ideas are because everything just looks so monotonous. Because the passive way to mind map is like, you're just reading, oh, I'm reading chapter 1. And chapter 1 has like 3 subsections. And you're just literally like transcribing the entire chapter into like a different layout without really thinking about how does this relate with this? How does this relate with this one over here? How does like this part relate with that over there? It's like, most people in mind map, they just transcribe. But like when you have like a structure to follow that forces you to think about the information, then like a better mind map would be like you're using color to emphasize like this is different from that because of this. You're using arrows, you're using different shapes. Like you're actually trying to compare the information to each other and see how they're related. I think that's like the most powerful part of a mind map. So we have like 2 videos that we've made on this already that we can link above. We don't want to get too into it, but the tree note is a framework that we teach where each letter gives you like pretty clear instructions on how to get the most out of your mind maps.
So I would probably just give it an A, even a B maybe.
Yeah. I'll say A.
Let's give it an A. Next one on the list, mnemonics. What is a mnemonic?
Is basically a good way to memorize like lists of things where you just like create a pattern or create like a rhyme or create some sort of mini framework where you're just memorizing a list.
Yeah.
Usually there's no rhyme or reason to this. You're just memorizing them. And it's useful like when you're memorizing large lists or a lot of things. Like in med school, everyone used mnemonics for sure.
There's tons of mnemonics. There was like the cranial nerves one.
It's like fun ways to memorize things, but the thing is you have to actually memorize the mnemonic too.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really help you use the information. It just helps you recall it. So then you fall into the risk of just recalling isolated details and not really understanding the big picture.
Yeah, I would give mnemonics a C. So the next one on the list is not really a technique again, more just what people have to do, which is sleep.
A necessity.
Yeah. Sleep is something that should not ever be sacrificed.
I mean,
ever. Beyond school.
Well, I mean, like sleep, people agree that it's healthy, it's good for you. Like no one's going to deny that sleep is good. But I think the part about sleep that some people overlook is that it's actually good for your learning because while you're sleeping, that's when your memory is getting consolidated. That's when everything that you've learned during the daytime is being moved into your long-term memory. It's like what you're doing right now. You took the memory card out and you're trying to save it into your laptop.
Yeah. So we can continue learning.
Yeah.
Capturing it.
Exactly. Like think of the camera as your brain, which our memory card just ran out of space because we didn't sleep.
I don't think anyone will deny how good it feels to wake up after a good night's rest. Sleep is S tier, hands down.
Yes. Sleep is sleep tier. Basically.
So next one on the list is doing homework.
Oh, this is interesting.
Generally speaking, I disagree with homework, but that is simply because for the most part, homework is attached to a grade or a percentage. And when you tell a student they have to do an assignment or else, that puts them into a state of a fear of missing points, FOMO. And so they will do whatever it takes to complete that assignment and forego any potential benefit of learning from it. I've been a student who also does this, where like if you have like a take-home quiz, like everyone just forms study groups and they just share answers. They just we just take turns. Like today this person's gonna do it, and the next week I'll do it. We'll all share it together. And it's like a commune of just copying homework and answers together. And so if that's the case, it is incredibly unhelpful. I think if homework was optional and or not part of your grade, and it was really just for giving you feedback about how to improve your learning, it can be useful. But for the most part, I don't think anyone uses homework in a way that is useful.
You got to be strategic about your homework. You don't have to do all of your homework.
Yeah.
But you shouldn't skip all of your homework. How much of your grade is it worth? And if it's not worth very much, then you fall into the trap of like homework feels very urgent to do. But is it actually important? Like, are you actually going to learn something from it? Or are you better off doing something else to learn better?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah. So I'm going to give homework a C just because I don't want anyone failing out of school because of me. Next one on the list is studying with music.
Yeah, I got mixed feelings about this one. A lot of studies on music, and basically music is not that great, but it's just so enjoyable.
Yeah, speak for yourself.
That it makes me yeah, I like using music to study.
I know, I'm just kidding.
I think that music gives you like that enjoyability factors. Like I remember I would never take practice tests with music because I really need every single brain cell possible.
If you follow these 3 practices that I do for music, then it might not be as bad as you think. 1, don't listen to it too loud. That is very distracting. 2, listen to music that is without lyrics. You don't want to be singing along to anything. And 3, don't pick music that's too slow, because I found, at least for myself, that if it's a little bit fast, I would say like anywhere between like 90 and 130 BPM is probably the best range to be in.
Are people even gonna know what that means?
You don't want it too fast because then it's gonna get you too ramped up. And so if you have it too slow, then it's gonna doze you off. So
then what about like binaural beats? Because like the point there is like you're trying to sync your brain waves to like a certain.
Yeah, I don't know if I consider binaural beats music though.
Yeah,
it's like sound. I don't know. I have, I guess if we want to classify it differently.
Yeah, I mean, there's some sounds that could be helpful. Like white noise is helpful for people.
Right. Music, I was specifically talking about something that's like someone created for entertainment purposes.
Yeah.
Enjoyable.
Artistic. Music is more artistic.
Give music a C.
Sure.
As much as I hate to say it, hate to see it, music is a C. All right. Next one on the list, creating content. Super underrated, actually.
Yeah.
I think creating content or reframing I think creating content is a very specific use case of it. Learning through having a reason to create something.
Yeah.
is an incredibly powerful way to learn for us. At least on YouTube. It's like we have a reason to learn because we want to teach, we want to make these videos. And so it forces us to learn a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Not just like the study and the learning stuff that we teach. We learned how to set up our cameras. We learned how to market. We learned how to advertise and how to sell. All these different skills came from us trying to achieve some kind of project, which is like a YouTube channel. And so I think if you can attach what you're learning to some kind of project, to some kind of hobby.
Yeah. Like ever since we've been creating, I think the important part about creating is it forces action.
Yeah.
And I think that learning is taking action, doing things. Reading is not learning.
Just consumption.
Yeah, you're just
You're
consuming
not
things.
Producing, You're not creating anything with it.
Yes, but learning means like you're behaving, you're acting, you're doing something. So just thinking about the word create, that is learning. Creation is learning. Reading is not learning. That's all. I think that's a really important distinction.
Yeah, and it's really fun. I mean, I think every human, this is maybe us going on a soapbox, but every human is creative. You just haven't tapped into what it is.
To be human is to be creative.
Exactly. You just haven't tapped into what it is that you like to create.
You can be like a doctor that creates like a treatment plan. You could be like an accountant that creates like spreadsheets. It's like creating data from data is extremely valuable. So yeah, creating just basically means that you are practicing what you're learning.
Yeah, you're synthesizing ideas to generate something that came from you, that came from there. Expressing that, and so that is very valuable. Creating content.
I mean, I'm gonna say it's S tier.
I'm biased also, but yeah, it is S tier. All right, so the next one on the list is not really again a technique, exercise.
It could be a technique.
Oh.
But yeah, I mean, it's like a
like a bench press.
Yeah, no, sure. Exercise improves your memory and all that stuff. Exercise helps like focus too. So your energy levels. There's so much that goes into it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you covered everything. I would say exercise is very valuable. I mean, it's not like mandatory like sleep is.
Yeah. It doesn't, yeah, it's not mandatory like sleep is. I would say if we're like a B or an A, I don't know. What do you think?
I'll just give it a B because I do know a lot of people who don't exercise and they still crush it and learn. Next on the list is group discussions. I think group discussions, like many of these, can be done very, very well. And it can be incredibly useful.
It comes back to mind mapping and blurting. It's like, you need a structure for group discussions because if you don't, it's going to quickly be a waste of time, get out of hand. You can learn so much, like especially of the people you surround yourself with, the 5 people that you want to be most like. It's
also, yeah, like, you're talking like a mastermind then at that point.
That's like a mastermind. Yeah. Like why did I get into med school? Because I surrounded myself with pre-meds who wanted to get into med school.
Right.
That's just plain and simple.
Yeah. If you're doing it in a way where you're just hanging out with your buddies who procrastinate all the time, they play video games on their phones, no one's prepared or no one's like read the lectures, and you get together and try to study, you will be better off on your own versus participating in the group because most people probably don't use it. B, because you don't need it.
Sure.
But yeah, it's pretty good.
So you can get by studying solo.
Yeah, and sometimes it's hard to find people who are like actually self-improver and
yeah, but like beyond school and after graduation, group learning and group working is definitely S tier.
Yes.
So that quote, like, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Next one on the list is visual associations.
Visual associations is basically breaking a concept down and then turning it into a visual. One easy way to use visualization, say you're mind mapping, right? And in this mind map, you have like a bunch of different ideas coming off of this one thing. Is there a way that you can ask yourself, how do these all relate to each other? And can you turn all of this into like one single picture, like, and tell a story with it? Like maybe there's like I'm just drawing a storm cloud with a thunderbolt. I don't know why, it just came to my head, but like maybe all of this reminds you of like, you know, a storm. So then you would just, instead of drawing all these out, you can just draw a storm here, and instantly by looking at this one image, you will know all of these together. So I guess the point of visualization is you're breaking things down into their simplest parts, and then you're making it so that you can recall it as fast as possible. It would take you like minutes to read this whole page of notes, but if you turn like chunks of these pages into like a visual, you know, then instantly by looking at like one of these things, you know, like, oh, this picture means all of this stuff. Yeah. And just looking at it, like, what is it? A picture's worth 1,000 words. Just looking at it, you'll be able to review your notes much faster. But I would give visual associations an A, I would say. I think it's pretty powerful.
All right, next up on the list is chat GPTing, which is funny because it used to be Googling,
Oh yeah.
but now it's chat GPTing.
Chat GPTing. I mean, pretty soon it's probably going to be whatever else.
The next AI.
The next AI, like Barding or
Yeah.
Binging or whatever other ones there are. I recently saw this interview with the CEO of NVIDIA. And he was saying like the most important skill to learn in the future is prompting, like knowing how to talk to AI. And I was very shocked because not too long ago, everyone was saying that the most important skill to learn was coding. Now AI can do a lot of the coding for you. And what's more important is knowing how to talk to the AI to get what you want. When you're trying to learn, knowing how to prompt means that you have to understand what to ask it.
Yeah.
So it forces you to think about the information in a way like, how do I extract exactly what I want from the AI? It requires you to critically think. So I think that prompting, I guess we should probably call it prompting. I don't know if it would be an S tier, but like just the idea of prompt, probably like probably a B or an A.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a B. I'm gonna give it a B tier just because it's so easy for us to over rely and or offload learning to AI or algorithms instead of trying to understand it ourselves. If you come up with a really good prompt and AI just does all of the work for you, and then you don't have to try it all to piece it together or learn, then it could be a bit harmful also to use it as a crutch. And so with that caveat in mind, I'm just gonna give it a B. Finally on the list, we have cramming.
Cramming. Well, I mean, if cramming is the opposite of spaced repetition, then does that automatically make it a D since spacing is like an A?
Well, yeah, I mean, I like and I dislike cramming. I like cramming in the fact that if you are cramming efficiently, which is like, I only have this much time, what are the most valuable things I need to extract from it? I think that's a really good way to approach learning because you are focused on like the high yield. What is the most high yield stuff that I need to know? But if cramming you mean by you only study for like 2 hours for your exam ever, then I don't think it's that good.
The way you don't want to cram is to lose sleep. Sleep is an S tier technique, and a lot of people sacrifice sleep with cramming or by cramming. I think cramming was pretty valuable for me, like when I was in college and I was taking like a lot of classes that I didn't care for or that were really boring, or I knew I wasn't going to be using like prisoner studies or something like that, or like anthropology or something. I would just cram for the quiz, do well, and then move on with my life because it was like a required class. So it's useful in some cases, but it could be detrimental if you sacrifice other things.
I don't think it's a good habit to get into. If anything, you want to build systems that are sustainable and that are inherently not stressful. And cramming is a system that is incredibly stressful whenever you do it. Like whenever someone says, oh, I have to cram for this exam, it's never coming from a place of positivity. And it's never coming from a place of excitement. It's always dread, remorse, and or regret. I mean,
C for cramming, I guess.
I'll give it a C. Yeah, it's in the name. We'll just give it a C.
It's an average technique that average people use.
So looking at this list, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 S's. It's actually more than I thought we were gonna have, actually. Do we need to bump any of these down?
I mean, it's just gotta, you just gotta have your honest opinion, right?
Yeah, no, this is what we're saying here is absolute truth. This is how we would rank study skills. And all those things you just described there, thinking about the system, thinking about how do we reach desired difficulty, how do we challenge ourselves, how do we avoid, passive learning. These are all things that we go into very deep with our program Study Quest.
I think in general, there's a lot of techniques and there is a optimal way to use it and there's like a not so optimal way to use it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we really emphasize in Study Quest is we make sure that you use the techniques correctly so that you're getting the most out of your learning. Yeah, it's our program. If you're interested, then we'll have links in the description below. Go ahead and check it out.
Let us know if we got anything wrong, if you completely disagree, if you love it, if there are some things you want to try, or if there are any things that we missed that should be in this list.